Hi everyone, my name is Neha, and I'm here to talk to you guys about imposter syndrome. So imposter syndrome is this buzz topic right now. It's a lot in the articles. I feel like a lot of people are starting to talk about it and understand what it means to them. And so I'm here to talk to you about that. I'll do a little bit of an intro, and then after we're all depressed and realize how much we're relating to imposter syndrome, I will not leave you, and we can talk about actually, since I have it myself, outed, how do I deal with it? And I've obviously come up with a very regimented approach as an engineer. And also, how can we support each other if all of us are experiencing imposter syndrome? So, like we said, the first part is going to be what it is and why it's a thing. It's just going to be 5 minutes, so just bear with me, and then we can get into the meat of the presentation. But not without a story first. So, I am actually not a computer science major by trade, but I'm a software engineer here. And I realized about 2 years in, when I was doing energy consulting, that I was having fun, but I kind of wanted to try out programming, but I was incredibly nervous to make that jump because I was surrounded by people who were so amazing at what they did. Like, I would see people on Vim just like typing left and right, and you would see these screens popping up, and all of a sudden, in 1 hour, you would see this app pop up that could do amazing things. I wanted to do that, but it sounded kind of terrifying. Like, I don't know if I could actually do it. So I decided to eventually quit my job from scratch and say, I'm going to teach myself how to program. And I wanted to apply to a program called Hacker School, which is now called Recurse Center, and they allow you to apply every 3 months. So I applied once, and I got rejected, and then I applied again, and I got rejected. And so I was like, all right, fine. I'm going to keep on programming on my own and like see how far I can go. And my friends are like, you should apply for a third time. And I was like, you are crazy. Like, there's no way I'm going to go and apply for a third time and get rejected again. Like, obviously, it wasn't meant to be. It's okay. And I'm just going to keep on going with my little journey. They're like, no, you have to apply again. And I was like, I hate you. Stop doing this. So they won, and I applied. And for that third time, I finally got into the program. And that was a huge turning point in my career. So you would think that once I finished that program, 3 months later, that I was like, I finally made it, right? And then you would think that after I got my first software engineering job, that I thought I'd made it. But actually, I kind of feel like a picture is worth 1,000 words, and I feel like I'm surrounded by these amazing penguins, and I'm this goose in a tuxedo trying to fit in. So yada, 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 more software engineering experience, kept on chugging along. And you would fast forward to 3 months ago when I joined Pivotal Labs. I'm incredibly grateful to be here. And I love it here because everyone's so technically able, but also everyone's really nice. Everyone's very personable. We actually care about each other. We're all empaths. And yet, sometimes, I feel like I have no idea what I'm doing, and I'm just kind of terrified because someone's going to figure out, and obviously now that I've told you all know, that I have no idea what I'm doing. So that's kind of what imposter syndrome is in 2 pictures. But more formally, imposter syndrome defined is a psychological phenomenon where people are unable to internalize their accomplishments. So what do I mean by that? Internalizing your accomplishments, I think my favorite way to describe it is this concept of faking it until you make it. So people keep on going along, and faking it, but at some point you're starting to make it, and I feel as though a lot of us don't actually realize that they're starting to make it. And so that is where you have accomplishments and you're not internalizing them to yourselves. So it's this idea of feeling like you don't belong, feeling like you have no idea what you're doing, and you might be focusing on your failures. Interestingly, this term is not new. So it's coming up in articles a lot now, but it came up about in a psychological study in the 1970s. And this was a study based on women who were high-achieving women. And they realized that a lot of them were not internalizing their accomplishments to themselves. I don't think this is exclusive to women. I actually think it's pretty prevalent in the tech industry and for people who push themselves. So if you're a high achiever, congratulations, you kind of earned this imposter syndrome. So I know you all are eating lunch, but just bear with me for a second. I want you to close your eyes. I can see you all, so if you're not closing I know, right? So close your eyes and think about the last time that you felt like you didn't belong. that you might have had no idea what you were doing. Maybe you got some positive feedback, but you attribute it to other factors. So, I was just lucky, it was the team, it was leadership, I just had a lot of time to accumulate to what I was doing, magic, randomness, I don't know. And maybe this is, to give you some more context, maybe this is when you joined your last job, maybe you got promoted, maybe you were trying to make a big decision, maybe it was as simple as just voicing your opinion in a meeting. Maybe you said, I don't belong here, or I'm in way over my head. So you can open your eyes, but I want you to raise your hand if you've felt like this in the last year. All right, look around. And this is wonderful because you're not alone. So it's a very common phenomenon. And especially with pivots, I found that on one-on-one conversations that a lot of us are going through this. So when do you feel imposter syndrome? Often, I've noticed that we talk about it when we are looking different, when our experiences are different. So obviously, my experience is not your typical experience. Who actually gets rejected 2 times, right? So when you're new, when you're around accomplished people. But I also want to argue that it happens when you're doing well, when you're being rewarded, or pretty much any time. It can kind of crop up. And if we're more aware of what's going on, we can actually do something about it. So let's talk about this with respect to goals, right? We're very ambitious people. We push ourselves very hard, especially as pivots. And when we set out this goal, right, it starts with this small, low-risk side. It's this dreamland, right? So you're like, okay, I'm like going to acquire this new skill. Things are going really well. And all of a sudden, there's this turning point. And I call it taking the leap, which is when things go from low risk and experimental to this execution side. And it's much more high risk. And then you have these thoughts that are like, what did I get myself into? Oh my God, I have to advocate for myself now, and this is terrifying. So once you take that leap and it kind of goes forward, that's when imposter syndrome can kind of crop up. And I want to focus on those pieces, specifically when you have to make a decision. So it can lead to uncertainty, self-doubt, and holding yourself back. But why don't we talk about it and beat our own mental battle so we can focus on the ones that actually matter. All right, that's it. Everyone's sufficiently depressed now? Are we good? Are we good? Let's talk about an action-oriented approach. So I wish that all I had to say was, if you just believe in yourself, right, just think about how awesome you are, and then it'll just go away like magic. I tried that, and kind of works sometimes, momentarily, but no. To start off, I gave myself 3 givens in order to be able to approach this problem in a scientific manner. 1, my imposter syndrome is not going anywhere. Tried it, still there. 2, it's everywhere, and I'm not alone, which a lot of us raise our hands. I didn't really see fully, but The third one is I'm not letting it get in my way. There's so many people out there with imposter syndrome who are faking it and actually making it, so why should that get in my way? I'm going to engineer this problem. So I came up with 6 steps. I'm actually going to take you through them and show you how, if you analyze your process, your thought process, and kind of stop it at some point and go through these manual steps, you might be able to convince yourself out of it and feel a little better. First step is to recognize that you're going through imposter syndrome. So that's understanding some of the language that is around it. If you hear yourself saying this, or any of your friends, that I don't deserve this, I'm just lucky, I shouldn't bother, it's only a matter of time before they figure out I don't belong. That's a very common phrase. That is imposter syndrome in and of itself, right? So I like to think about it as okay, you think this, and all of a sudden you have to go into this mode where you're in battle mode, and you're I'm experiencing imposter syndrome right now, we're in a battle, and we have to do something about it. So I actually hear the Pokemon music in my head where it's da-da-da-da-da-da-da, and you're da-da. Okay, anyway. So for my story, I'm actually going to talk about a really simple story, which was a year and a half ago, I got my first opportunity to speak in front of a technical audience. So my boss was hey, do you want to talk for 5 minutes about making your own apps? And I was like, no, I can't do this. And I was like, I don't feel accomplished enough. Like, do you want to ask someone else? Because, I don't really feel like I'm the authority to talk about this. You should talk to everyone else in my company to see if they want to do it. And if they don't, you can come back to me. And she was like, that's not why I asked you. So I was like, okay, this is the imposter syndrome talking. I've recognized it. I'm in battle mode. I got to do something about it. So that's when I go into my second step, which is to separate your facts and your feelings. So what does that look like? In my case, I had feelings where I was afraid to speak because I thought I would blank out. I've done this before. I've literally been on a stage in front of 450 people, and it was like during my senior class, and I blanked out. No one noticed, but I did, So it gets into my head. So I was afraid to speak because I thought I would blank out. I was worried that I wasn't the right choice. I didn't want to embarrass my peers. It was kind of like this Mulan thing where I was like, I'm going to embarrass my ancestors, my CEO, my company, and it just became this huge thing. And I was like, all right, these are all feelings right now, so I need to separate them and kind of table them right now. So what are the facts? This was a great opportunity for me. I've done my own web apps, and I need the experience. I was actually doing a talk later on in front of a much larger audience. So this was one of those low-risk opportunities. All right, so what are we going to do now? I actually created this step process and realized that cognitive behavioral therapy is very similar to the process that I make myself go through. And one of the steps that I left out, and I want to make sure that we all go through, is to generate positive feelings, to make sure we have that balance. So I don't know how to do that, right? What am I going to do? Just think positively? No. I need to analyze the facts. So what I did is I started to expand out the facts. I've done my own web apps. I wrote them from scratch. I'd recently spoken with the CEO, yada, yada, yada. Maybe the people in the audience would relate to me. These are all closer to facts. And after that, I felt pretty badass. So I was like, okay, we're in a good spot now. I think it's time to make a decision. I'd also like to say that I was talking to Rachel, and she pointed out that this analysis that I go through is very similar to a SWOT analysis. So whether that's something you're more comfortable with or going through these manual steps, I think that sitting down and understanding your situation from a very balanced perspective will help. All right, so now it's decision time. What are you going to do? I like to answer the question, why should I do this? So I looked at the facts alone. I wanted to know why I should move forward, and what could this lead to? And you can come up with whatever you want, but I like to repeat to myself that even if the risk is high, the experience of preparing in and of itself is invaluable. And then I like to do my favorite exercise, which is what is the worst that could happen? So if I mess up on this 5-minute talk, I panicked so much for a 5-minute talk. I was like, if I mess up, what's going to happen? High school kids are not going to listen to me for 5 minutes. I don't know, let's be more dramatic. I might curse in front of them, which is something that happens sometimes. I might maybe this will bubble back to my manager, and she'll be like, what happened there? And then I was like, okay, let me get the most dramatic I possibly could be. And I was like, I could get fired, right? But am I really going to get fired? And on top of that, if I do, I'm a woman in tech. Someone's going to hire me, right? So I was like, and I'm on top of that, I'm pretty damn good at my job. So I'm not going to get fired on this. And even if I do, I'm going to be okay. So having gone through this really dramatic storyline, I was like, all right, it's going to be fine. It's not a big deal. So step 5 is do it. I actually don't have much to say about it. But I do have 2 points. One is that this is a manual step in my process, and it's mandatory. So I don't care what I come up with and how crazy and scared I am. I have to just do it, right? And that is the decision-making point. Now we're on the execution side. And so I like to imagine it like this Looney Tune cartoon where you have this tiny crack, Wile E. Coyote's kind of looking over. It's oh, it's not a big deal. And then you zoom out, and it's this huge cliff, and there's crocodiles at the bottom, and you're going to die, right? So I think that when you say yes and you're ready to do it, between that and actual execution is a terrifying process. And when I'm in it, I'm pretty debilitated. I don't know what to do about it. So I make a plan beforehand, and this is like something I do now when I'm in a calm, normal state of mind, which actually right now I'm not, but normally. So how am I going to support myself for and on the big day? And so for me, I found the techniques that work for me. So that's support from my peers. I actually have some friends in the audience who are supporting me, and I'm really lucky because they know that I need them and they're here for me. I watch pump-up songs and videos. So my favorite one is a YouTube video called Jessica's Daily Affirmation. It's this little 5-year-old who's like standing in front of the mirror, and she's not doing this for the camera. She's literally just talking to herself. And she's like, my hair is great. I love my sister. I love my dad. I love my whole house. And she's just like going crazy. And then she's like, I can do anything. And she runs out of the bathroom, and she just goes on with her life. And that's the end of the video. And she's 5. She has no idea she's like on this performance. And so I'm like, oh my God, if she can do it, I'll be okay. And then the last piece is to focus on the goal and not myself. So I'm speaking in front of this entire audience. I am terrified, but the whole point is it's not about me. It's about you guys getting value out of my talk. So if I think of myself as a UI and I want to focus on my audience, I feel a lot better because it's not about me. It's about you guys. All right, last step. You did it. You're awesome. But I feel like people are just on to the next one, on to the next one. They just keep on moving, right? If you want to break out of a psychological cycle, you need to do a small thing at the end, and you need to reflect. So I asked myself questions. Were my concerns valid? In this case, I did this 5-minute talk. I did fine. I ended up going on and being a mentor for the hackathon. I got to present the awards. I was okay. And realizing that was like, this imposter syndrome voice, that's kind of a lie sometimes. So now when I hear the voice again, I'm like, hold on. I need to go through my step process. And I'm starting to realize that my imposter syndrome voice is not a reflection of reality. All right, step 2 is to celebrate. So we're so used to moving on forward. I think that sometimes we need to step back and we need to celebrate ourselves. So whatever that is for you, maybe for me it's watching more YouTube videos or having a glass of wine or taking a longer walk home and meandering. We should make sure that if we are pushing ourselves out of our comfort zone, that we take the time aside to celebrate ourselves. All right, this is not just for big events. I was talking about my big event where I was talking for 5 minutes, but I think this is an everyday thing. And if we're more cognizant of it, we can actually do something about it. All right, here's the meat. This is my favorite part. How can we help other people? There were so many people in this audience that raised their hands, right? How can we support them? What can we do about it? So I thought about it, and there's 2 major pieces that I wanted to talk about. The first one is cognitive behavioral therapy. I'm not saying you need to go into therapy. I'm saying that as engineers and as people who push ourselves very hard, we often will look to scientific papers or mathematical papers or academic papers to get more knowledge about our work. But what are we doing about ourselves? We should understand ourselves very well too. And so I found that with reading about cognitive behavioral therapy, I've learned a lot about cognitive restructuring. I actually have some resources at the end, and I have a blog post about it too, of further resources that we can read about to understand what we're doing. All right. How are we going to promote an open work environment, life environment, academic environment? I broke it out into 3 categories. That's taking initiative, being available to other people, and being willing to support them. And I have actual actionable things here, so don't worry. The first one is to put yourself out there. I found that there's this term called vulnerability-based trust. If I talk about the things that I'm going through and the times where I am actually vulnerable, people start to open up to me too. And it's a terrifying process because I want everyone to think that I'm perfect. But I'm not, and that's not actually very relatable. So once I start to talk about it more, I'm partially like doing this talk and talking about how I have imposter syndrome, I feel like we start to promote a discussion. And so I encourage you guys to speak to your peers not only about the things where times are amazing, but times where you're also very vulnerable. For availability, I think that we sometimes get feedback, but we don't have that last piece, which is to thank each other, that they're putting themselves out there and they're willing to go out on a limb for you. So to welcome that feedback, to thank them, and to reach out to people who are brand new. So I joined 3 months ago, and I seem like I'm a huge social person that loves to talk to everyone, but I'm incredibly shy. And I'm not like the type of person to go up and say, "Hi, my name is Neha. What do you do? Talk to me." And so I think that if we're willing to reach out to people who are newer, who are less comfortable, that we can promote that open environment. And many people have done that, and I'm so grateful because there's no way I would say hi to you otherwise. I'm too scared. So the last piece is support. So the first one is stand up when your peers are uncomfortable. When someone is put in a position where they're uncomfortable, they freeze up. But you, having been in a position where you are not experiencing that uncomfort, like, is that a word, uncomfort? Oh, well, it doesn't matter. So if you're not uncomfortable at that moment, you have so much more power to do something about it. And I actually had an experience pretty recently where someone had something pretty sexist. I froze up. I didn't know what to do. But someone else stepped up, and they said, "Hey, that's not cool. Like, try not to say that." They were in a position where they were not feeling that uncomfortability, but they were able to stand up on my behalf. And I think that we should all take it upon ourselves to do that too. Number 2 is to help others hear their imposter syndrome. So I remember when I was applying to hacker school for my 3rd time, during the interview I was saying things like I don't really know if I'm good enough, and like I don't know why I was saying this during my interview, but she stepped aside. She's like, "Have you heard of imposter syndrome? You should read more about it." She's like, "This is like, you're doing great. You should understand that this is just a voice that's inside of your head, and it's kind of 2 sides to the same sword. You're pushing yourself really hard, so you're going to be really analytical and hard on yourself." The last one is like a very specific thing, but it's passing on overheard positive feedback. So at my last job, I was in a job where a lot of positive feedback was said, but not necessarily circulated back to those people. And so I was like, I'm gonna try to like be that bridge. So I would go up and say, "Hey, someone was saying that you did great work, and like they were really proud of you." And it's so surprising how shocked these people were. And some people started crying, and they were just like, I had no idea. I didn't know that I was doing a good job. Thank you for telling me, because like I didn't even say it. Someone else already said it. So they did all the work, and I just had to like be the bridge. So sharing overheard positive feedback is something that I think helps a lot with this underlying confidence and understanding that your actions are making a positive impact. All right, so here's a little case study. So Recurse Center is what Hacker School is now called. This is the logo. And they have these 4 mandatory social rules. So this is a very extreme case where they're like, "I'm going to make these rules mandatory." And I love these rules, and I try to uphold them. And so I wanted to explain them to you. The first one is called feigning surprise. So if you are having a conversation, or maybe we're having a conversation together, and I was like, "Yeah, I went to Recurse Center," and someone's like, "What's Recurse Center?" And I'm like, "You don't know what Recurse Center is? Oh my God." And like I make you feel bad. Like that is an unnecessary line. Asking this question, "You don't know what X is," after they just told you they didn't know what it is like this line that takes someone who's gone out of their comfort zone to ask you a question and to put them down. So no feigning surprise. If I do this, let me know and call me out. Be like, "You're feigning surprise. What is that?" Number 2 is well actuallys. So if 2 people are having a conversation and I'm like, "Oh yeah, like I heard about this like cognitive therapy behavioral thing," and someone's like, "Well, actually, it's cognitive behavioral therapy." And I'm like, "Great, you corrected me, but this completely derailed the conversation. It has nothing to do with the subject." So focusing on actually making the conversation productive and not necessarily correcting them in the moment is something that has been a social rule because we want to make sure that everyone's moving forward. So literally, if anyone says, "Well, actually," we just call each other out. And we're like, "No, well, actually, so you can't do that." And if I do it, please let me know. The last one, a third one, is called backseat driving. So I think that I haven't actually experienced this much at Pivotal Labs, which I'm pretty happy about. This concept is when 2 people are in a conversation and a third person is over here being like, "Oh yeah, you should just try that library over there," and then they just leave, right? So lobbing over advice over to 2 people who are having a conversation is helpful temporarily, but it's not helpful in the long term because you're not there for it, and you're not part of the conversation. So as two people who are having this conversation, having the ability to be like, I appreciate what you said. Would you like to join the conversation, or do you want to not do that? And then as the third person, if you want to join a conversation, formally ask to. Say, hey, I heard you guys were talking about this. Do you mind if I join the conversation and talk about it? And stay there for that duration of the conversation. Don't just lob advice over the wall and walk away. The last one is no subtleisms, no sexism, no racism. While I was in Recurse Center, we took it upon ourselves to call each other out for it. And I violated all 4 of these rules. And I'm so glad that someone was able to be comfortable enough to talk to me about it, because now I'm much more cognizant of what I do. And I do genuinely, and I think we all do, want to promote an open environment. So having that comfortability to be able to call each other out, I think, is the first step. All right, so I have a lot of great resources. You don't have to get your notebooks out, but it is posted in a blog post about imposter syndrome, about cognitive behavioral therapy, and a lot of people who are successful who do experience it. And so this is the last slide, guys. We're almost done. I just wanted to hone in that you are not your imposter syndrome, both I as myself, and I want to tell you that too. Now that I'm much more cognizant of what I'm going through, I understand that this is just this little voice that's going to be in my head forever, and I can just still move on with my life. And now that I'm able to talk to other people about it, I can help them too. That's it. I don't know what time it is, but yeah, I can do questions if you have any. We got a mic. I know I didn't do that good of a job. I didn't answer all the questions. So.
What's your favorite pump up?
Pardon?
You told us your favorite pump up video. What's your favorite pump up song?
So sometimes it would be The Eye of the Tiger. And I have some other like reggae songs that I really like too, because I grew up in Miami, and that's like my favorite genre.
Would you distinctively started experiencing imposter syndrome after moving into a career in software engineering, or
Yes.
did you have it beforehand as well? Or?
I definitely had it beforehand. I wasn't as cognizant of it until I started moving into tech, because it's such a buzzword here. It was one of the reasons why, having gone through college, I wanted to switch my major into programming, but I looked around myself and everyone was just like so amazing and so good at what they did, so I didn't even make the switch in the first place. And definitely had some like self-esteem issues coming out of college, because sometimes college just like beats you into the ground, and afterwards you're like, I can't do anything. So yeah, it's been there for a while.
Sorry.
I was just thinking, do you think that there is more imposter syndrome today because there's so many more new jobs and so many more new skills you need to learn on the fly, that it creates this sense of imposter syndrome for everyone, like more prominently?
That's a really good question. I've actually never thought about that. I'd like to open it out though. Does anyone else have any thoughts? I mean, if I were to think on the fly, I think that imposter syndrome has always been there, but it's definitely much more amplified now that we're constantly changing and we're in careers that last way less of time. But it's an excellent question. I would love to read more about that. I'm going to write that down. Okay, any more questions? All right. Clap.